I was born blind, orphaned before the age of 3. I'd grown up in a children's home for the visually impaired. I wish I had happier memories of my parents, their voices, or their smells, but the only thing I can recall about either of them is their deaths. Those I can somehow see perfectly. Sharpened images in my mind, quite different from anything else I've been able to imagine about the world around me. I first learned of the color white and red because our bathtub was white, and red was the color leaking out of my mother's head when she'd slipped and cracked herself open on the porcelain. Her wide, blank-eyed stare is the only recollection I have of her. She was beautiful, however, and my father, rest his poor soul, he probably thought I didn't like him the first time he held me, as I burst into tears from the vision of his horrific fate. 'Twas the vision that first taught me what trees look like, as one pierced him into the ground. I learned green from the leaves, yellow from his crew's vests, and of course, pink from his brain. I've seen many deaths, but it wasn't until I was about 5 or 6 when I realized I was causing them. When I realized it was my touch that invoked them unto death. There were far too many instances to keep thinking they were coincidences. They don't die instantly, of course, but be it days, weeks, or months. No one survives once I've put my hands on them. My visions always come to pass. The first caretaker I had at the home was Mrs. Harrington. She taught me blue. I tried to tell her not to go on her vacation that weekend. I'd seen her flailing in the water, gasping for air, sinking into the darkness. The ocean is so incredibly blue. The following week, we had a new caretaker. When she told us Mrs. Harrington isn't coming back, I said to her, "Did she drown?" She looked at me with a wide-eyed shock. I could feel the tone in the atmosphere shifted, and she said, "Stephen, how did you know that?" But I felt the worst for the other kids. They were just trying to be my friend, and I didn't know any better. After 6 children met tragic ends, I'd finally realized my curse and asked our new caretaker for my first set of gloves. For the years that followed, I'd only ever take them off to wash my hands. It kept everybody around me safer, but I was trapped in darkness again, unable to see through touch. Those beautifully horrific visions that always taught me new things was something I'd grow to miss. As I'd gotten a bit older, people didn't like me very much. I was quiet, disabled, or so they thought. I became the bully's first choice at my middle school. One day at recess, the bully came up to me. He asked me with a sort of sarcastic snarl in his tone if I'd wanted to play tag. I laughed to myself a bit. It was kind of funny. I said to him, "Trust me, brother, you wouldn't want to play tag with me." They would always make fun of me for wearing gloves. So one day, when he tried grabbing my walking stick, I took them off. I reached out and grabbed a hold of him and said, "Tag, you're in it." And as I grabbed his hand, it happened. My mind sprouted with images again, magnificent waves of orange as it emanated from the fires that swallowed his screams. He wasn't around much longer. None of them were. My first vision in years, it was overwhelmingly euphoric. For the first time, I'd associated what had handicapped me with a sense of power, control. God had given me a gift to weed out those that lacked honor, that lacked goodness in their nature. I no longer had to suffer the guilt of what I'd done to my parents and those poor kids. I could take souls that deserved to be taken. I spend my days in hiding and my nights lurking, listening, slithering through the streets of a city that may be your own, grazing those I deem intoxicating to humanity with my deathly touch. I'd added to my collage of tragically beautiful visions, the only memories I'd ever known. I knew that if you wanted to know someone's true colors, all you have to do is listen and let them show you. The world around you is full of people who think they're so much better than us. Narcissists, self-loathing individuals. I wanted to make the world a better place. I was the gateway, the determiner of death. Or perhaps this is just what I'd convinced myself of to justify what I was about to do to people. I wanted to see everything. It wasn't until a few years and hundreds of visions later that I realized taking the gloves off had subjected me to more than just getting my sight back. I was no longer as invisible as I'd once felt. They started watching me, tracking me. I could sense their presence. I began panicking. I kept my gloves on for months to try and disappear back into the darkness, but I'd already seen too much. I'll never forget the day my stomach sunk deeper with each knock on my front door from a man who'd said, "Stephen, oh Stephen, we just want to talk to you, Stephen." I said, "Go away. What do you people want from me?" He said to me, "Stephen, you've affected a lot of people's lives. We've been watching you for quite some time. We want to help you." And out of fear, I did the only thing I knew how to. I took my gloves off and reached out to grab the man, but to my surprise, I saw nothing. I'd felt a strange material. He was wearing some kind of protective layer that must have been able to block my abilities. He said to me, "Now why would you try to kill me, Stephen? We've only just met." I was shaken to my core. He really did know me. He knew the darkest parts about me that I'd never shared with anybody. I was baffled. I said, "How can you help me? I love the way I am." He said to me, "Stephen, we can't let you keep doing the things you're doing. You know that, don't you?" He said, "We work for a very powerful intelligence agency, and your abilities would be of massive assistance under the guidance of people who understand you. Stephen, there are many others just like you who would love to meet you. Family Stephen, with stories you can relate to, people who will care about you like no one else could." I'd immediately felt compelled. I've been alone my entire life, drowning in darkness, sentencing people to their demise for a glimpse of the world I'm otherwise exiled from seeing. But my desperation to believe him was overrun with mistrust. I said to him, "You're lying. There are no others." He says, "We knew you'd say that, Stephen. So I brought Ella here to meet you." I felt a strange energy come over me as I heard the car door open and somebody step out, an energy as strange as my own, something I'd never experienced. As she approached me, I felt my mind weirdly entangled with hers, as if I heard her before she spoke. She said to me, "I'm sorry about what happened with your parents, Stephen. It wasn't your fault." My stomach dropped. How does she know that? They must have told her, probably briefed her about my life story before she came here. And before I could respond, she said to me, "No, they didn't tell me those things, Stephen. I'm like you, but different." My expression shifted. She was in my head, swimming through my thoughts, my dark thoughts, the collage of fatal visions from all those I've touched. She was seeing everything. She said to me, "These aren't your memories. You couldn't have died this many times. Where did these memories come from?" Before I could respond, she gasped. I felt her energy shift. She said, "What are you? Why is my father's death in your memory?" My stomach dropped. The hair on my neck stood tall. I was petrified, afraid to think because she'd see it. It wouldn't be long until she realized. I said, "Ella, listen, And before I could continue, she said, "You killed him." I'd felt excruciating pains in my head that had instantly brought me to my knees. As I began screaming in pain, I could hear the agents try to run up and restrain her, but they were stopped by her influence. I could hear them sharing my pain. The sensations intensified. It felt like she was turning my brain inside out. I saw all of my memories flash once more, and the pain finally stopped. But as the tension fled my mind, so did my memories. I was a completely blank slate. I had no recollection of who I was. She took the only thing that made me